Hello, I'm Dr. Joanna Nurse, Strategic Advisor for the Interaction Council, and I'm here today to introduce a manifesto to secure a healthy planet for all. This is a collaborative initiative by the Interaction Council, which is a group of former heads of government. This is a group of former heads of state and government, co-chaired by Bertie Ahern from Ireland and President Obasanjo from Nigeria. I'm here to talk about a very serious issue in terms of the climate and environmental crisis. At the moment, we're experiencing the symptoms of a 1 degree early feverish planet. It doesn't sound much, but in terms of human health, 1 degree can cause a lot of symptoms, and in fact just 3 or 4 degrees can be enough to kill a human being. In the course of human history, our civilization over about 800,000 years has only existed within a -1 and a +1 degree threshold. So, having reached 1 degree with early symptoms of a fever, we are now entering totally unknown territory. We have early symptoms, many caused by climate and environmental stresses, of increasing disasters, increasing global security challenges like migration and violence as well. Let's go on and have a look at the temperature chart. This is taken from the UN Environmental Programme, the Global Gaps report that's published every year, 2018 this one. This is gigatons of carbon emissions, and this is timescales here to 2050. At the moment, our current policy trajectory, this is the line that we are actually travelling on, you can see is still going up. Our temperature, ultimately, as well, is still rising. You probably have heard a lot about the Paris agreements, about the need to keep to 1.5 degrees. These are seen to be safe limits, up to 1.5 degrees. They estimate is where is seen to be safe in terms of reducing the risks from tipping points. To actually achieve the 1.5 degree threshold, you can see we actually need to take a very sharp turnaround over this next decade. That means we really need to step up, scale up our impact in terms of reducing carbon emissions to create a stable planet for everyone. In terms of the risks of feedback loops, once we're over 1 degree or 1.5 degrees, these increase. So they're positive feedback loops. This is essentially things like where we have increasing wildfires, and the melting of the ice caps actually escalates the process even further. And there's a real risk from that, and some researchers estimate that if we enter those thresholds and go past certain tipping points, which might happen at even 1 degree, there's a risk of a hothouse Earth scenario. This is really important because it emphasises the need for us to act now, and ultimately what we do in the next year or so could affect all of our lives as well as much of the life on this planet. Let's look a little bit into the future at the temperature chart. This is the UN report, the IPCC report. It's a chart taken from chapter 12 that came out last year. This is the temperature threshold up to 12 degrees Celsius, and along the bottom here are years running to 2300. Particularly of concern, if you look at our current trajectory, so this is more or less where we are now, by the end of this century here, on our current trajectory, we're estimated to reach between 3 and 4 degrees. On our current trajectory, we were estimated to reach 4 degrees Celsius by the end of this century, whilst if we keep to the current Paris agreements, we will still reach 3 degrees. Now you can see from what I said already, this is not going to be enough. But what happens if we keep on this trajectory? So if we go on for another century, so this is 2200, our grandchildren's grandchildren, you can see our current trajectory puts us in a range of between 3 and 10 degrees Celsius. This is extremely serious and actually emphasises the need for us to act sooner rather than later, yet alone the risk from tipping points. If we carry on into the future, you can see that temperatures still go on, and they estimate that actually it will take millennia for the Earth to cool down. And this is partly because a lot of the heat that we've generated since industrial times has been absorbed in the oceans. And a recent report has found that about 90% of the excess heat that we've generated has actually already been absorbed by the oceans. And over time, as a very warm bath, this will release itself into our environment over the course of thousands of years. And they estimate the increased temperature that's already held in our oceans is about the equivalent of 36 degrees Celsius. So we actually need to pay attention to this and potentially need to find ways to stabilise and reduce the temperature of the oceans. So you might have heard about the risks of mass extinction. Is that a real threat or not? Let's have a look at past geological history. The Earth has experienced 5 mass extinctions so far. The most serious one that geologists are especially concerned about happened 250 million years ago. It was called the Great Dying, and there was a good reason for that. It killed 90% or more of our oceans, 70% of all land species, and most of the planet's trees and plants, microbes and animals, clearly. Now, that is not a good place for humans to live in. When did this happen? 250 million years ago, and from the past geological records, they found that this occurred from temperature increases of just 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. If you remember from our past, the previous chart, we are forecast to reach that range by the end of the end of the coming century. So our grandchildren's grandchildren are faced with the threat of a very real and possible mass extinction. And in fact, if you look at what's happening now, we have an escalating environmental crisis with increased and escalating rates of our mammals, birds and fish disappearing. So we need to be very concerned about the pending environmental crisis as well as the climate crisis. As a doctor, I would be so concerned that if Patient Planet entered my surgery, I would see straight away that Patient Planet was critically ill and actually suffering from respiratory and circulatory collapse. The forests are disappearing, our oceans are becoming extremely acidic. And as a medical doctor, I would be so concerned about the health and the failing systems of Patient Planet that I would be sending Patient Planet straight to critical care. Once in critical care, it would be possible then to resuscitate and stabilise the situation. And actually, we need to be thinking in a similar way about how we respond to the climate and environmental crisis and acting in an emergency response to make sure that we're scaling up and speeding up the size and scale of the challenge that we actually need to address, as you've seen. Once stabilised, it's only then really that we can move to sort of a proper treatment plan and recovery process, rehabilitation, and then work together to create a flourishing world, the sort of world we actually want to live in, and the sort of world that we want to leave for our grandchildren and our grandchildren's grandchildren. The manifesto essentially outlines the evidence and makes the analogy with Patient Planet. It then outlines actions, including calling for an emergency response to the climate and environmental crisis to ensure that we actually secure a healthy planet for all. It then maps out the process for recovery and the vision of creating together a flourishing planet for all. It calls upon everyone to be a guardian to secure a healthy planet for all, and to ultimately to ensure the well-being of future generations. You can find the manifesto on the Interaction Council website, and it outlines visually as well the main steps to take. Calling an emergency response, then the recovery process, including securing a healthy air, land, water and food systems for planet, place and people, working together in communities for a flourishing world, and strengthening guardianship and calling upon all of us to become guardians to secure a healthy world. So far, the manifesto has been endorsed by over 30 organisations. And if you want further information, please visit the Interaction Council website, and feel free to disseminate the manifesto further on social media. The hashtag is Interaction or Interact Council, and do please contact me on drjoenurse@gmail.com if you would like to support this effort in any way or to endorse as an organisation. Thank you.